Hello, I'm Bob Sullivan. I'm ready for your questions.
All right, Bob. Can you share a story about your neighbor who happened to have a big role in the auto industry here in the city and how that showed up in our neighborhood?
Okay, well, it was actually three neighbors. Uh, our family moved into North Rosedale on Breton Drive in 1958, and even at that time, they were already living there when we moved in, and we lived there until 1986. So on our one stretch of Breton Drive, from Outer Drive going westward to Grand River, just one block, and on the south side of the street lived the owners of three very iconic car dealerships in Detroit, but in Michigan as well. So one of them was Jack Baker's Redford Rambler, and it had previously been a Nash dealership. And then if you know the history of Rambler, it became part of American Motors and so forth, so it later became an American Motors dealership. Today it's a laundromat on Grand River. But our neighbor was Jack Baker, and I'm still in touch with his children, who are all grown adults now. And I remember going to the dealership when my grandmother died in 1972. She had an old Rambler. It looked like a Volkswagen Beetle, but it was a Rambler. So my mom sold it to Jack Baker Redford Rambler, and they had it. They were so amazed at it because it was a very old car at the time, and they kept it in their showroom for many years as a novelty piece for people to look at and bring people into the dealership. The other dealer, one of the other two dealers, was Klett Cadillac, which was at one time the biggest selling Cadillac dealership in the United States. And Mr. and Mrs. Klett lived at the corner of Breton Drive and Lancashire on the south side of the street again. And he was famous for, among other things, his picture and a story about him were in Life magazine at one time. And most people today have never heard of Life magazine. You might hear about Time Life music assemblies or something like that. But that was a really big magazine at the time. Just about everybody had a subscription, and once a week you would get this large format magazine that was famous for its pictures, its photography. So that was him. The other one was Raleigh Barrett Chrysler Plymouth, and Mr. and Mrs. Barrett and their children lived on Breton Drive. So it was a coincidence. It's not like the three of them got together and said, hey, we're all good friends, let's buy houses close to each other. That wasn't it. It was just a coincidence that one after another they bought houses and ended up being there. So Grand River, at one time, right near North Rosedale, was the place to go to buy cars, just up and down Grand River, north and particularly heading toward downtown were all kinds of car dealerships. And right on our corner of Evergreen and Grand River, on one corner was Emmert Chevrolet, and right across the street was Mulligan Lincoln Mercury. And then just a little bit heading northwest on Grand River, on the other side of the street was Jack Baker Redford Rambler. And then further out toward, I think it was 7 Mile and Grand River, was Klett Cadillac. But you could go in the other direction, east of Southfield on Grand River, and car dealership after car dealership. And I remember people from around the country would fly into Detroit to buy a car in Detroit because they would feel they could get the best deal, they could get the best options and so forth. It was like well known among people in the United States, if you're going to buy a new car and you want the best of everything, come to Detroit and buy your car at a dealer in Detroit. So I met some of those people. I was in sharing a taxi cab once with someone from Metro Airport, and they were from Texas, I think, and they came here to go car shopping. And then at the dealerships themselves, sometimes I would meet people who were from out of town, and they came to this stretch of Grand River just to go car shopping. So That's about all I can remember off the top of my head. Oh, they asked me to tell about. Our family had a very close family, Rose and Willie Arnold, and Willie worked on the assembly line at Chrysler. And the one thing I remember about him was the story goes that there was a suggestion box near the assembly line where the workers could submit a suggestion if they had any ideas about how to improve the assembly line or how to improve work conditions, anything having to do with their jobs. So the story goes that he submitted, he had a brilliant mind, and he analyzed everything, and he came up with all kinds of ideas, and he write them down on a piece of paper and submit them. And several of his ideas were accepted by Chrysler, and he personally resulted in many changes in the assembly lines and how they did operations in the plant and so forth. And the story goes that he would get raises, he would get bonuses, he would get promotions because he came up with all these ideas. So that's all I can think of for now.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is Bob Sullivan again, and I've been asked to tell the story about my grandmother. Her name was Marie Lamb, and her Rambler car. And I forget the name of the model. I think it might have been a Rambler American, but it looked sort of like an old-fashioned Volkswagen Beetle. Very rounded and short and squat. And she lived on West Outer Drive, not far from here, near Greenview, Avon, right around there on the north side of Outer Drive. And she would tell my mom and me that she was either the first woman in Michigan or one of the first to obtain a driver license. And back when, and back in her day, you only had to be 14. They discriminated. Boys had to be 16, but girls could get a driver license at 14. So she wanted to, when she was a young teenager, she wanted to drive a car and get a driver license. And that was unusual because back at that time, a car was considered like a newfangled mechanical device, and it was something in the realm of men and teenage boys. It wasn't today you wouldn't think about it, but back then it was considered a man's thing to drive this piece of machinery. But she wanted to drive, and she got her driver license at the age of 14. But despite all the years that she was driving a car, when she drove her car, when she lived on Outer Drive, and I would stay the weekend with her sometimes, so we go grocery shopping, she was scared to death to drive the car, and so much so that she would back her car out the driveway and then look up and down Outer Drive until there was absolutely zero cars coming, and then she'd back her car into Outer Drive and she would hug the curb, and she would go 15, 20 miles an hour along the curb until she got to a parked car that would block her way, and then she'd wait until absolutely every car had passed by her and you couldn't see a car as far as the horizon, and then she would pull out and swing around the parked car and then continue along hugging the curb in the parking lane, and that's how she would drive places. But her car, one time, she told my dad and me, and I would have been a young boy, maybe 12, 14 at the time. She told my dad there was a noise coming from under the hood, and could my dad take a look at it? So my dad popped the hood open, this great big blue hood lifted up in the air, and my dad and I looked down into the engine compartment, and we were shocked at what we saw, more of what we didn't see. It was a large empty cavity, and at the bottom was this tiny little motor that didn't look any bigger than a lawnmower motor, and that's what propelled the car. So when my grandma, her name was Marie Lamb, by the way, when she passed away in 1972, my mom inherited her car. It was a stick, and none of us knew how to drive a stick. And we had enough cars, so we sold the car to our friend Jack Baker, who ran Jack Baker Redford Rambler. So he bought it, and he didn't sell it. He kept it in his showroom as a novelty item to show people and to preserve history and attract people into the showroom, I guess. But that's the story of her car. I had a lot of fun driving in that car, and I did barely learn to drive it myself. After she passed away, I drove it up and down, in fact, the street right in front of us here, trying to learn how to drive a stick shift. I learned well enough to get it down here and back to our house, but I never quite caught on to a stick shift. Riding with me would have been a very jerky, noisy ride, but that's the story of the car.